Good evening, everybody. James Hancock here. I'm back to do a reaction video to the 92nd Academy Awards. Ordinarily, with my videos, I do a lot of writing ahead of time, but tonight, I'm just kind of wing it because I want to keep this very fresh, very spontaneous. But obviously, the story of the night was Parasite from Bong Joon-ho winning 4 awards. Not only did that film just clean up, it was the first time that a foreign language film won Best Picture. So that's just a monumental achievement by Bong Joon-ho. He's a damn good filmmaker. I won't lie, I was rooting for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but I got no problem whatsoever with Bong Joon-ho cleaning up and going on with 4 statues. And from what he said in some of his comments, he's got a serious night of drinking ahead of him. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through the entire evening in the order that the awards were unveiled, as opposed to kind of like grouping them together by movie, because there are a couple movies that won more than one award. But I'm just going to go through my notes sequentially. But in terms of narratives, the big one for me was obviously seeing that The Irishman got totally shut out. I really enjoyed The Irishman. That was my second favorite movie of 2019. But the reality is 2019 was an unimaginably good year for movies. I can't remember the last time I saw a year that was so competitive, particularly in Best Director. I know obviously Best Director is always going to be controversial depending upon the nominees, but all 5 of those directors I thought just delivered phenomenal films. So I feel like 2019 will go down in history as a great year for movie making. And I try not to get too worked up about films that win or lose or who get nominated or don't get nominated, because when I was younger, I used to get really pissed off, like the year that Titanic shut out LA Confidential from a lot of things, or the year that Forrest Gump shut out Pulp Fiction for a lot of things. I guess I was just younger and more passionate. But looking back on history, like my Mount Rushmore of favorite filmmakers, which is Howard Hawks, Orson Welles, Sam Peckinpah, and Sergio Leone, between them, I think Orson got nominated for Best Director once for Citizen Kane. Howard Hawks got nominated once. Peckinpah got a nomination for a screenplay. Leone never got nominated at all. So these are my favorite filmmakers ever. And I think Howard Hawks won an honorary Academy Award in 1974. But I'm used to my favorite filmmakers being overlooked by the Academy. And if you look at the Academy overall, it's not necessarily the best guide to the best in film history over the last 92 years. So it's fun gossip. But a week from now, most of us will have forgotten everybody who won in various categories, but I think Parasite's going to make a lasting impression just because of what it represents in terms of historical significance. But I guess I shouldn't be too dismissive about the significance of an Oscar, because obviously they have a massive impact on box office. But for me, I love the pageantry, I love the glamour. I get really annoyed by the self-important speeches, but there weren't that many this year. I mean, there were a few little snarky lines here and there, but nothing that was truly loathsome in my opinion. I like when the Oscars are more about spectacle and entertainment and showbiz as opposed to politics, but maybe I'm just old-fashioned. But I can remember a time when the Oscars had massive cultural significance and a lot more people watched them. I think a lot of people tune out now because they don't want to hear the self-important lectures from the podium. So as I get into the winners, I'm going to mention the ones that I wanted to win, as well as those that obviously won. But I guess my only real knock against the entire evening was I was not into the musical numbers. And to be fair, I'm usually not into the musical numbers. I think the one Academy Award performance ever that I really enjoyed, and I wasn't even alive yet, is Isaac Hayes' performance of Shaft, which is in 71 or 72. But I feel like it's already a really long show, and the musical performances make it way longer. But what made it a little shorter, perhaps, is not having a host tonight, which I didn't mind because usually they get Jimmy Kimmel, and I think he's about as funny as an orphanage on fire. But Steve Martin and Chris Rock did a pretty cool intro. Ricky Gervais, who did a great job hosting the Golden Globes, he posted some kind of mean-spirited tweets on his account about the Oscars, which are always a great laugh. But yeah, I love Ricky Gervais. I'm seeing him on the stage in a couple months, which I'm really excited about. But let's just go ahead and start diving right into things, because first up we have Best Supporting Actor Oscar went to Brad Pitt for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I would have been totally fine if Joe Pesci had picked one up for The Irishman. He's an absolute legend. I really did enjoy The Irishman. I'm blown away that it won 0, but when it comes to Cliff Booth, he was such a stud and he was so damn funny. And I think that movie probably has the best hippie beatdowns in movie history. Who knows? There might be some from like the early 70s that are stronger, but there was so much about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood that I loved. And of all the movies that came out last year, that movie has the most sequences that I keep watching over and over again, like when they're coming back from Italy and you're seeing all the lights coming on in Los Angeles. I was blown away by that movie. But it made piles of money, and it got a few awards, so no one's going to cry for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But next up, we got Best Animated Movie. My understanding is that I Lost My Body was the best animated movie last year. I did not see it. I've heard that it is fantastic. I could have lived with How to Train Your Dragon 3. I really didn't like Toy Story 4. I thought it was a total cash grab. I thought the series had its perfect ending with number 3. I almost got overwhelmed by the furnace scene in Toy Story 3. I was totally indifferent to Toy Story 4, but whatever, Pixar, they're a juggernaut. It's hard to defeat them. And then with Best Animated Short Film, I saw none of the nominees, so I have no strong feelings. Hair Love won, but so congrats to Hair Love. But once again, I have nothing positive or negative to say about any of the 5 nominees. I didn't see any of the documentaries. I didn't see any of the documentary shorts. And I didn't see any of the live action shorts. So in all those categories, I'm totally, completely indifferent. So the first big surprise of the evening for me was Best Original Screenplay. I was rooting hard for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but Bong Joon-ho, he won for Parasite, and he kept it very classy in his acceptance speech. And I need to check the rules on foreign film submissions in different categories, but in my opinion, every single film released around the world should be eligible in every category. I'm not quite sure if it's still like this now, but once upon a time, a country would have to put a movie forward as their official kind of entry, and that country was only allowed that one entry. But there are plenty of countries like Japan and China and South Korea that make tons of great movies every year. I feel like we should basically allow any good movie from anywhere to be nominated. So I need to check and see what the rules are. In any event, we'll be coming back to Bong Joon-ho in the very near future. I have a lot of nice things to say about how he conducted himself this evening. But Best Adapted Screenplay, I was rooting hard for The Irishman. I thought that was just an absolute masterclass in story structure, and I was just riveted every minute of that 3.5-hour running time. But I can live with his upset because I'm a huge fan of Taika Waititi, who won for his adaptation of Jojo Rabbit. And he's just having such a great year. He was great on The Mandalorian as both director and as actor. He's got Thor: Love and Thunder on the way. Taika is definitely starting to reach a career zenith, and who knows, it might even go up from there. And I loved his speech where at one point he just says, well, that's it. I mean, he's one of the funniest guys walking the earth. And I loved how his winning the award was a great fuck you to risk-averse people who were claiming that you cannot make a comedy about particular topics. In my opinion, you can talk about any topic, you can write about any topic, and you can make jokes about any topic. And when you have somebody who is as gifted with comedy as Taika Waititi, of course he can make a movie making fun of Nazis. Like Charlie Chaplin did it, Ernst Lubitsch did it, Mel Brooks did it, and now Taika Waititi's done it. And I just, I feel like that's a great little, I guess, he basically is getting the last word against all the naysayers and critics that really dogpiled on the movie last fall, saying that it shouldn't even be released and how dare you, etc. So high five to Taika Waititi. Next up, we have Best Live Action Short Film. As I mentioned before, I saw none of the live action short films, but The Neighbor's Window won, so congrats. And then we have Production Design. Once again, I was rooting for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, a recurring theme of this video. And sure enough, Barbara Ling and Nancy Haig won, and well-deserved. They made that world live and breathe. There's just so much cool stuff about that movie in terms of recreating the Hollywood of 1969. And if there's anything that's like one of the major takeaways of that movie, it's just a love song to the stuntmen and the forgotten filmmakers who made low-budget genre films and television shows in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s. You know, the world that basically gave birth to Quentin Tarantino, because all like movies like Lawrence of Arabia, which I love, they've been celebrated so many times, but I loved how Once Upon a Time in Hollywood really zeroed in on the forgotten storytellers and forgotten performance of that era. And so I love everything about it. And so I was thrilled to see it pick up another statue. Then we have Costume Design. I was rooting for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood again, but Jacqueline Duran won for Little Women, and that's well-deserved, obviously. I think that's the only award that went to Little Women, but I was thinking, like, in terms of power couples, both Noah Baumbach and Greta Gerwig, who are together, they both had movies that were up in a variety of categories, and both movies ended up going home with the statues, so I feel like they're kind of the Oscar couple of the year. Then Mark Ruffalo came out to give out the awards for Best Documentary Feature as well as Best Documentary Short Subject. Once again, I saw none of these, so I have no strong feelings about any of it. But one quick note about Mark Ruffalo being kind of insufferably smug in his tone. And I love how when people get mad about nominees in the Oscars, they always act like it's some outside entity that's like a bunch of people smoking cigars in a dark room conspiring to leave certain people out. But the Academy they're made up of themselves. It's an inner circle. They're voting on their peers. They're voting on their friends. It's like when people get left out of the nominations for Best Actor or Best Actress, it's the actors in Hollywood who are voting. So I wish they would be a little bit more self-critical as opposed to acting as if it's somebody else's fault. I always want to say, like, well, before you start pointing fingers, point some fingers at yourselves when it comes to your frustrations. In any event, that's my one little rant about Mark Ruffalo, who I love as Hulk, but sometimes he can be a little self-important. Then we've got Best Supporting Actress. I was rooting for Laura Dern, and Laura Dern won for Marriage Story. I did not like Marriage Story. I know I'm in the minority. A lot of people really loved Noah Baumbach's film, but I feel like she was the best part of it. She and Ray Liotta were far more interesting than the actual central characters. As I feel like everybody kept talking about how rough and rugged and traumatizing that movie was. I feel like even relationships that go well are more traumatic and more hardcore than what was depicted in that divorce. I just feel like it was very tame. They were tapping the brakes. It was very vanilla. Noah Baumbach made a much better version of basically the same story with the squid and the whale. And so I just thought that the movie didn't go for it. I feel like divorces really get nasty. If you really want to see a great, nasty divorce story, watch Ingmar Bergman's Scenes from a Marriage. I feel like that's what Noah Baumbach was reaching for, but fell way, way short. And then we had a famous movie song montage. It wasn't bad at all, but I feel like the show is already long enough. Why have a long montage? I guess I didn't mind the montage as much, but why did Eminem come out and sing Lose Yourself? That song came out in 2002. I see zero relevance between that song. It's a song I really enjoyed, and I enjoyed seeing 8 Mile. It's cool. But what the hell does an 18-year-old song have to do with the 2020 Academy Awards? The only positive was at one point they cut to Gal Gadot in the audience singing, and she just looked so astonishingly beautiful as she sang along. So it was worth it for that shot, but once again, the show needs to be shorter. It's just too goddamn long. But the next big award was sound editing. I was rooting hard for Ford v Ferrari, a movie that I saw twice last year. And Donald Sylvester, he won for Ford v Ferrari. So I was very excited to see that. That's one of those movies where the sound editing really just, it puts you right in the driver's seat, right in those race cars, hauling ass. It was just an incredibly immersive, intense experience. And I feel like of all the movies that came out last year that you need to see on the big screen, like that one and 1917 and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But there are a couple that you really need to see on the biggest canvas possible. So I was thrilled to see Ford v Ferrari get some recognition. And then with sound mixing, and admittedly, sometimes I have a little trouble understanding the difference between sound editing and sound mixing. My layman's basic understanding is that the sound editing is basically the picking of the various flavors and sounds that are going to go into the soup, and then the sound mixing is actually the art of stirring them all together and creating the effect. But why they're not one award, I'm not really sure. You'd have to talk to somebody who works in post-production. I was rooting for Ad Astra for sound mixing because of I thought the sound was so transportive in that movie. But 1917 one, Mark Taylor and Stuart Wilson, well deserved. I have no problem with that. I love 1917. I thought 1917 was going to sweep this year's Oscars. I was actually surprised by how few Oscars it won. I think it won 2 or 3. Yeah, 1917 won 3 Oscars. So I was a little surprised that it didn't win a hell of a lot more, but I got no problem whatsoever with 1917 getting that recognition on a technical level. And as I mentioned before, I was not into the musical interludes throughout the show. And then this guy came out and made a little rap about how there are a bunch of nominees that don't look like me. And obviously he wrote that before the night's show because everybody's always complaining about Oscars so white. But Bong Joon-ho and Taika Waititi, they're not white. And last time I checked, they were up on that stage quite a bit tonight. I mean, so perhaps people should tap the brakes on some of their criticisms on that front. And then with cinematography, I was rooting for Robert Richardson. He's one of the all-time greats, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But Roger Deakins, I have no problem with him winning for 1917. It's his second. He's one of our greatest living directors of photography. I feel like he's one of the few directors of photography that has like rock star celebrity status on Twitter. Like they're directors of brand name recognition, handful of screenwriters, obviously a lot of actors. But almost never do you see people talking about directors of photography. But go on Twitter on any given day and you'll see people celebrating his work. And he made a great speech where he thanked each member of his team by name, and obviously Sam Mendes. I feel like in terms of thank you speeches, it was a slam dunk. So hell yeah to Roger Deakins, well-deserved. Film editing. I really wanted Thelma Schoonmaker in a big way. She's been working with Martin Scorsese off and on since the late 60s. I know in the 70s they had a few films apart because she was struggling to get into the union, but she's basically been the editor that has helped Scorsese carve his entire filmography. They're lifelong friends, lifelong collaborators, and I really wanted her to win for The Irishman. But another movie that I like, Ford v Ferrari, won. Michael McCusker and Andrew Buckland, they won, and they did a brilliant job with it, so I've got no complaints. I just feel like Thelma's getting toward the end of her career. I would have loved to have seen her walk home with a statue, because she's just, like, name any great Scorsese movie that you love, and there's a very good chance that she edited it, apart from, like, Taxi Driver, because that was during the time where she wasn't allowed to work on those movies. In any event, she's fucking fantastic. They made a pretty funny little interlude where James Corden and Rebel Wilson came out in their outfits from the movie Cats, a movie that I did not see, but they're making a joke about the importance of good visual effects. I thought that was actually maybe the best joke of the evening. And then for visual effects, I thought Avengers Endgame was just a no-brainer. I mean, if you just look at that final battle, or just even just the build-up as Cap standing there, and one by one, he starts getting backup from all the heroes from all the movies, and he says, Avengers Assemble. It was such a, I don't know, it's one of the most epic moments in superhero history, both on the page and on the screen. So I thought it could have just won for that one shot, but 1917 won. I got no problem with it. I thought 1917 was a brilliant movie. When it comes to visual effects, I think of sci-fi, fantasy, superheroes, etc. Sometimes they can be a little more subtle, though. So 1917, very well crafted movie and much deserved Oscar. Makeup and hairstyling, I was rooting for Joker just because I like Joker so much, but Bombshell, no one's going to complain about Bombshell winning. What they did to those actors to make them resemble the real-life individuals was uncanny. So it was just a complete and total metamorphosis for those actors. And I feel like as a performer, when you've got that kind of detail going into how you appear, it just helps inform your performance so much. So that Oscar, I think, is well-deserved. I got to come with a different expression than well-deserved, but, they earned it big time. But foreign language films now, Best International Feature Film, they've changed the name, and I've got no problem with that, because Best International Feature Film, there's nothing stopping somebody from making a film in English elsewhere or whatever. I just feel like if it comes from abroad, but I just feel like all the international films and the domestic films should all be stirred together, but slowly but surely, hopefully we'll get there. But I was rooting for Parasite. This was the one, I think, this was the obvious Oscar of the evening that everybody knew going into it. And I loved how Bong Joon-ho, when he won this, he says he's very ready to drink tonight. He thought he was done for the evening, but he still had 2 more awards to accept, which we'll get to in a sec. And then with Best Original Score, I was rooting for the Joker, and much to my happiness and delight, Joker won. Hildur Gudnadottir, there's no way I'm getting that correct, but she won the Golden Globe in the same category as well. And yeah, she knocked it out of the park. The score is one of the things that made Joker such a cool, killer experience. And I just love everything about Joker's success story. The fact that they had a small budget, they had an R rating, they just went for it. They had a very specific take and vision for the character, made $1 billion worldwide, got 11 Oscar nominations, won 2. And then you see other superhero movies like this week in Birds of Prey. It's really struggling in terms of box office. Everybody's got an opinion about why that movie is struggling. But my hope is that you look at a movie like Joker, and I hope we'll get more movies that go in that direction, where you get these dark, hard, edgy takes on superhero characters, because I'm just tired of so much family-friendly entertainment. And then with the original song, this is the one category where I truly gave 0 shits. Probably just because I'm getting a little older. I feel like the biggest sign of getting older is when you completely lose all interest in contemporary music. I mean, I still like a great soundtrack, and I love a great score for a movie, but of all the different nominees, I couldn't have cared less. But Sir Elton John, he won for I'm Gonna Love Me Again from Rocket Man. I saw Rocket Man. I wasn't necessarily that blown away by it, but bravo to Elton John. Yeah, obviously he's an icon, a living legend, so I've got no problem with that. And then with directing, we had, I think, the most competitive category, and it was also my favorite moment of the night, where I was rooting hard for Quentin Tarantino all the way. Bong Joon-ho comes out. I was floored that it was him, because I thought it was either going to be Sam Mendes or Scorsese or Tarantino. And what was so cool is that he starts making his acceptance speech, and he starts quoting one of his favorite teachers from his time as a film student, and it turned out to be a line by Martin Scorsese himself. And Martin Scorsese seemed so genuinely moved. And then Bong Joon-ho started talking about studying his movies, and then he gave a shout out and a thank you to Quentin Tarantino for always telling people over the last 20 years about Bong Joon-ho's movies, because Bong Joon-ho's been around for quite a while, made a lot of good movies, and Tarantino, he loves Asian cinema, he loves Hong Kong cinema, loves Japanese, loves Korean. So he's been banging the drum for Bong Joon-ho for quite some time. And then Bong Joon-ho says, "Thank you, I will drink until next morning." he kept making me smile and laugh the whole evening. So I just that made me very happy. That entire sequence of events. And for the annual In Memoriam section, Steven Spielberg came out, and they had Billie Eilish performing yesterday, and they started showing all the actors and producers, etc. And it was actually kind of a sad moment for me because a person I used to work for was featured, producer Branko Lustig. I actually worked for him as a driver and as an assistant on Hannibal back in 2000. It was one of my first, I think it was my second paying job out of college, and he was just such a fascinating individual, such an incredible producer. And in terms of his life story, I mean, he was a survivor of the Holocaust. He's one of the producers on Schindler's List, but easily one of the funniest human beings I've ever met. And every time I got a chance to talk to him, whether it was about his life or about the movies he'd worked on, things like The Tin Drum, like the Volker Schlondorf film, he just made every day so fascinating and so just rich. And it was like, I remember we would go visit certain departments to make sure they were going to be ready with like certain sets the following day. And I'm like, Branko, like, do you think you make them nervous when you swing by to inspect? And he's like, I give a shit. He was so hardcore. And he and Dino De Laurentiis used to have these epic battles. They would scream at each other in Italian. Branko spoke like 7 languages, something insane. He's from Croatia, but English, Croatian, Italian, a bunch of different languages. But watching him and Dino De Laurentiis just throw down over the film because they were both producers on it was just such a delight. So Branko Lustig, we will miss you. You're a legend, and it was just an absolute honor to get to work for you almost 20 years ago. Then there's another great highlight that I love when Olivia Colman came out to present some of the nominees, and she was joking about how when she won her Oscar that it was the best night of her husband's life, and how she didn't even just let it go. She just kept bringing it up and talking about it more and more and more, and how they've had multiple children, and it was the best night of her husband's life. So it sounds like they're still enjoying some nice recreational sex, but we're getting into the major awards now, so we got Best Actor in a Leading Role. I was rooting for Joaquin, love Joker, and Joaquin won. And I worried he was about to make a really annoying, rambling speech. But I think he did actually make a good point at one point. He said that it's not about cancel culture and holding people's feet to the flames, but it's about giving people second chances, and how throughout his career, a lot of people have given him second chances. It sounds like he's a nightmare to work with, but it's worth it because he gives you these wildly unpredictable, savage, intense performances. And he almost started crying as he quoted his big brother, River Phoenix, one of the lyrics he wrote for a song. So I think it was a well-deserved Oscar. Once again, there's my term, well-deserved. Much-deserved Oscar. He knocked it out of the park. And hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll see a Joker 2 down the line. And then for Best Actress in a Leading Role, I would have been totally fine with ScarJo from Jojo Rabbit. And I would have been totally fine with Saoirse Ronan from Little Women. I hope I'm saying her name correctly. I looked it up ahead of time. People call her Saoirse and Saoirse and all kinds, but I think it's like Saoirse, but you have to kind of say it with an Irish accent, which I cannot replicate. But I did not see this coming at all. Renee Zellweger won for Judy. A movie I did not see. I've seen a lot of Judy Garland movies. I mean, I love Meet Me in St. Louis. And of course, she probably did her best work in A Star is Born. But Renee Zellweger, she made a really interesting speech where she talked about how the celebration of our heroes is one thing that unites people. And also, she gave another shout out to Scorsese. So I'm naturally going to be on her side about that. And then for Best Picture, I did not see this coming out at all. I thought it was going to be 1917's night. I was rooting for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Secretly kind of hoping Scorsese would win for The Irishman because he's getting toward the end of his career. And they announced it was Parasite. This was the first time a foreign language film has won Best Picture, which is pretty remarkable. And the movie's extraordinary. I mean, if you look back at my review from, I think, October or September when I saw it at the New York Film Festival, I love the movie. I was absolutely blown away by it. But I just couldn't believe that it pulled it off. It got the biggest award of the year. And who knows, this might open the floodgates to a lot more foreign films participating in the Academy Awards. And I just feel like I don't care where movies come from. I just want to see the best movies possible. And the Academy in the past has really just like confined all foreign films to one category, which is so silly. I mean, let them compete in every single category. And because I feel like healthy competition always makes actors and technicians and filmmakers raise their game, and collaborating with those directors is always good as well. So huge high five to Bong Joon-ho and his crew. They made a remarkable movie. Wasn't my favorite movie, but it was in my top 10. So I have no problem with it taking home 4 Oscars, which is a monumental achievement. So I think, yeah, all around, I think it was a pretty good show. A ton of movies that I really like and some movies that I really love went home with statues, so I really don't have any grievances about the evening. I think it was just a great year of movies and a really fun Academy Awards. So it's getting a little late, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I'm starting to lose my voice. I was at a wedding last night, drank too much, smoked a cigar, so I'm a little weak and weary, but I can't thank you enough for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed the Oscars. Hope that you enjoyed my reaction, and if you haven't seen some of these movies, definitely take a crack at them. It was a damn good year of cinema all around. And if you want to hear more about what I thought about 2019, you can check out my Best of 2019 episode of our podcast, Wrong Reel. So if you like this, please consider subscribing to my channel, hitting the notification button, because just because you subscribe doesn't mean YouTube's going to necessarily recommend my stuff. So the notification button is more important than actually subscribing. And if you want to talk more, you can find me on Twitter @Colbrex. But thanks so much for watching. Hope everyone has an amazing week, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.